everyone to today's event. Please feel free to, if you need to grab more food or water throughout the rest of our day, please feel free to go ahead. We have these all throughout the day. But yeah, I just wanted to start firstly to say welcome everyone. Thank you for making the time to join us today. You know, we're just starting our Pride celebrations. We know it's a busy time. So thank you so much for being here today. It's also a beautiful day. We do have access to our patio, so we'll be, hopefully you join us there as well during our reception. But yeah, firstly, let me just introduce myself. My name is Iyol Martinez. So Iyol, I-Y-O-L, kind of how I explain it is if you think about YOLO and you just add E and then you drop the O, Iyol. Yes, that's how you can say it. And if you also mess up, like no worries, I can always correct that for you. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the leadership programs coordinator at Pride at Work Canada. So I do all of our networking programs. I do also our leadership programs. We can connect more about that too if you're interested. And yeah, today I'll be our MC for the day. Before we get started, I do want to say that we have, oh, maybe I have to turn it on. Thank you. Thank you so much. We do have captioning and English available thanks to 3Play Media. And I want to give a shout out to our captioners who are online doing this. So the way that you would access it is just if you have your phone, just scan here the QR code that will take you to a Linktree code and you can just scroll down and look for English captioning, and that way you'll have it in your phone at the same time as we're speaking. So feel free to scan that over there. We also have our survey integrated into that Linktree for when we're done with the event. And you know, we always appreciate feedback from folks for our events. So yes, here's that code. Also for those of us joining virtually, because this is being live streamed, they'll also get the stream text link in the chat from where you can access the captioning. Also, I would like to start off tonight by acknowledging with respect the Lekwungen speaking peoples on whose ancestral and traditional territory we're having our event today, as well as the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Saanich peoples whose historical relationships with this land continue to this day. You know, at Pride at Work Canada, we operate across unceded, stolen, treaty, and traditional territories across hundreds of diverse Indigenous nations, which of course include Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA plus Indigenous communities. And, you know, also as we try to do more work on the Lekwungen speaking people's territories, we hope to continue building meaningful relationships here. We had our last ProPride event in 2019, so right before the pandemic. This is our first time coming back after that, so very happy to be back here again. And yeah, with that, I also want to say that we recognize that there are multiple barriers that impact Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA plus Indigenous people from accessing meaningful and affirming employment. So also at the work that we do with Pride at Work Canada is to look to reduce those barriers, and we're always open to feedback from employers, from Indigenous workers, job seekers, and making that a reality. There was the slide for now it's working. Yeah. And so with that, let me tell you a little bit about the work that we do here at Pride at Work Canada for those of you who are not as familiar with what we do. So through dialogue, education, and thought leadership, we work to empower employers to build workplaces that celebrate all employees, regardless of their sexuality or gender expression. And, you know, we do this, we have a lot of programming that happen across, you know, all of the country. For example, now we're having our Victoria ProPride. Last week we had our Toronto ProPride. Next one in July is going to be St. John's. So we're kind of going full force again with all in-person stuff. And so, yeah, at the end, we do have, again, once you click on that the link there, you'll get our website when you can always check out our events. We do have online events as well. Again, this event is being live streamed, so you can always check that out if you want to get more connected to us, to the work that we do. And so for today's agenda, we'll just go quickly over some community guidelines. We'll have some opening remarks. We'll move on to our panel discussion. We'll have a Q&A section. and some closing remarks, and then we'll have a networking reception. And please know that there will be more food coming in the networking reception. So another reason to stay all the way to the end. Yeah, and so with that, some of our community guidelines, we highly encourage, folks still, if you feel comfortable doing so, if you want to wear a mask, we do have some KN95 masks here at the registration table available for folks, right? We have also, as we have here with the food, right? Please use the tonsils, trying to also respecting personal space, giving enough space between each other. The nice thing, we do have this outdoor beautiful space. So as well, please feel free to use that. We also have gender neutral bathrooms right here through, I guess that would be your left, where it says pool entry. Please, that's where the bathrooms are located. And again, we are live streaming our event today. So we just want to let you know too that photography and filming is taking place today. So by taking part in this event, you're granting us permission to use these images for promotional purposes in our website. But also, if you would not like to photograph, please let our wonderful photographer, Britt, know. Yeah. And so with that, I'd like to introduce, we really want to thank the Parkside Hotel and Spa for generously sponsoring our Victoria ProPride event. At Pride Aware Canada, we really believe in the importance of working with local communities, and we're very grateful for the support that we received from them to put this event today together. So I will pass now the mic to Trina White, who is the Parkside Hotel General Manager, for some opening remarks.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And it's such a lovely day. So hopefully you do get outside and enjoy the lavender and the bees out there. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that we are on the traditional unceded territory of the Lo-Kwang-He people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. And that relationship's important to us here at the Parkside. We've actually been working towards an MOR with the Songhees. So I'd like to give recognition to them. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight in this wonderful event on diversity and celebrating diversity. At the Parkside Hotel and Spa, we are proud of having a diverse team. We are committed to an equitable, diverse, and inclusive work environment. Our hotel wants to fully appreciate our unique and collective differences, provide fair treatment, opportunities, and advancement to all of our team members, and foster a culture and environment where all can be seen, heard, and valued. More recently, we had Jane Goodall stay with us and recognize kind of our culture here. And I thought of a quote that Jane Goodall provided to end with, and that is, every individual matters, every individual has a role to play, and every individual makes a difference. Enjoy the night. Thank you.
Thank you. Ooh, sorry. Sure. Thank you so much, Trina, for those kind words, for those opening remarks. Thank you again to the Parkside Hotel staff as well. Colleen there, a shout out. Thank you so much for your help with putting all of this together. And now I'll also like to, introduce Victoria Mayor Marianne Alto. I do have here a bio slide. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, there's nothing worse than seeing your own bio up there, is there? Thank you all for coming. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. And thank you also for the land acknowledgements. It's always interesting for me to hear how people do them. And for us at City Council, we always gather together beginning with a land and sea acknowledgement as well, to be able to really understand the difficulty of all of our decision making, which speaks so much to land use, and that land is stolen land. And we all always acknowledge the fact that our entire city sits on the territories that belong to the Songhees Nation and the Esquimalt Nation. They don't live with us much anymore. And so very often we have people who ask us why we do that. And we always have to say, because we occupy their land. And so we should at least say thank you. For us, we always go a little bit further than that, and we actually try and urge people individually throughout the day, at some point every day, to find something really personal to each of you, to be able to make the words of thanks and gratitude actually personally meaningful, whether that's something you see or feel or touch or hear, or just an experience that you can attribute to the privilege of being here in these spaces. That's something that we ask each of you to do each day so that it becomes more than just words and you have an opportunity to really connect with that thanks. And we always begin by suggesting that at some point during the day, you open your heart and your ears and your mind and your eyes and your arms and you say Hash Kasiyam to all of our friends and relations and all of our families. It is delightful to be here with you today. Yes, apparently I am the mayor. This is a new thing for me, relatively speaking. I was a council member for 12 years, and so I knew exactly what I was getting into, but what I didn't realize was how incredibly fun this job would be, and partly it's because I get to do stuff like this. This organization is hosting today, and I have to confess I didn't know a whole lot about it until I did a bit of research, but what it really speaks to me about is that the opportunities that all of us have who work as employers of some kind to really change the very fabric of the organizations with which we work. I had the privilege a few years ago of leading a really interesting 2-year initiative, I guess you'd call it, which explored how the city delivers all of its programs to trans folk. And we found a lot of gaps and a lot of problems. And we ended up having a really fantastic opportunity to speak with many members of the trans community about how we could make that different. And that resulted in essentially a policy that completely revamped the way that we provide those services and how we think about all of the different diversity of people who are part of our residents. That was a really special moment for us to begin to embrace some of that work. And the work is not done yet for sure. There's lots more to do, but it was an example of what we can do as employers. And I just want to really laud the organization here for being able to prompt us to continue to do that work. Today, I had the chance to raise the Pride flag again and all of the 9 accompanying flags that drape across City Hall today just before lunch. It's a moment I actually confess that I find somewhat difficult. I'm relatively comfortable public speaking, but I find this day actually one of the most challenging for all because it is such a personal day for me. I joked about the fact that, when I was a young queer, you could say, a lesbian, I bet I'm going to like her. Because there weren't very many of us, frankly. And it was one of those things, at least not that you could see. And it was one of the things where you really wanted to like every queer person you found because there were so few people that you could actually connect with. And what is lovely about being here and what was lovely about today and what is going to be amazing about the next week or more, perhaps longer, is the fact that there is such richness and diversity in our community. And now you don't have to like everybody. In a way, it's kind of a privilege in a way to be a bit more choosy, I don't know. There you go. But at the same time, the plus side of that, of course, is it just does remind us about how different we all are and yet how much we share and how proud I have been throughout my life, actually, to be identified as queer. So thank you for all the work you're doing. Thanks for inviting me today. I apologize. I do have to go off to another event, which is not unusual these days. And so I will have to leave you very shortly. But thanks very much. And I hope you have a great week. And I hope to see you all at many events.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And I'd like now to introduce MP Randall Garrison, who will also provide us with some opening remarks. I also have your bio slide here.
Well, hi, everybody. I don't know everyone in the room. That's a great thing. Marianne and I go way back. So when we were looking out for each other as younger queer people, so we've been working together for 30 years. And I feel really privileged, even though Victoria's not in my federal riding. It's right next door, and I do get to work with Marianne a lot. So I'm one of the 9 out gay MPs in the Canadian Parliament. I'm the longest serving right now. And my biggest pleasure in the last election is we added some diversity. So guess what? Originally, we were just old, cisgendered, white, gay men, right? We're still too many of those as a proportion, but we've added on the first Two-Spirit MP, we've added on the first bisexual MP, and we added on a couple of more out lesbian MPs. So the group of 9 is getting better. The small C conservatives are always afraid that I'm always recruiting, and that's true. So we're still about 26 short. in Parliament, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about running for office. So they said I could have 5 minutes. They're going to have to get the hook, I think, because I love Pride events. But I want to do 3 things quickly. I want to talk about one great thing. I want to talk about 1 or 2 in progress things, and I want to talk about 1 challenge. And that's the way I'm going to try and keep tight here tonight. The great thing is at the flag raising on Parliament Hill on June 6th, we got something that I've been working on for 7 years. It's only a pilot. It's the first step. But we've been saying we need a clear and direct path to safety for queer refugees whose lives are at imminent risk. And most of you will already know why that is, although I had to explain to 4 ministers before I got one to do it. And it took me 7 years. Canadian embassies aren't always safe places to walk in and say, I'm gay, because they employ local staff around the world. And so it's very difficult for people to access our refugee system. And so we say, yes, we accept queer refugees. Yeah, just try and get through the door safely. That's a problem. And UN refugee camps are quite often not safe spaces, and some of them are absolutely dangerous places, like the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, where we've had seen, on average, unfortunately, about 1 murder per year and about 1 act of violence every month against queer refugees in that camp. And so what the federal government agreed to is that Rainbow Refugee can take direct applications without going to a camp or a Canadian embassy for government-sponsored refugees, 250 as a pilot program. This is a huge breakthrough. It's the first program like this in the world. And so it took us a long time to persuade them. Now, don't give me the credit. How did this happen? It's because the community groups got organized and started providing services to queer refugees. So Rainbow Railroad in Toronto, Rainbow Refugee in Vancouver, and support groups. I think there are 9 now on the Lower Island supporting queer refugees. And because the community got organized and provided those services, they made it possible for the government to do this. So shout out to all of you, because some of you will belong to those groups and some of you have friends in those groups. But it's the local queer community stepping up to provide the services that made this possible, not the government, right? We just finally got them to do the right thing. So that's a great thing. We'll see how it works. It's only was announced 2 weeks ago. They're still working on the details. It's only 250 people for this year, but that's 250 people who might otherwise end up dead. And let's be blunt about this in the current climate around the world. So that's good. Now, a couple of things in progress. Because it's Pride at Work, and I really respect this organization. I've done quite a bit of work actually with Pride at Work on questions like apprenticeships and making sure. I told the story earlier. I went to a very large company and we toured their apprenticeship program, and they said, you see, we've met all the categories. And I said, yeah, where are the neurodiverse people, where are the disabled people, and where are the queers? And they said, oh, can you help us? Which was the right answer. And it's organizations like Pride at Work that are helping provide the answer to those employers. And that work is really critical because they don't know how to do it. Sometimes they can't even see it. But when they do see it, they still don't know how to do that work. So Pride at Work is really essential to that. So the Employment Equity Act. I've been an MP for 12 years. For 12 years, I've been introducing bills to say, guess what? Guess who's not in the Employment Equity Act federally? Queer people aren't in the act. And it comes as a surprise even to a lot of members of our community. So I've drafted the bill, I can't remember how many times. And the government has now committed publicly that by the end of this parliament, they will include us in the Employment Equity Act. So it's a work in progress. It's still a promise. But who is that critical to? Let me say it's critical to transgender people, and it's critical to racialized people in the queer community. Because if all of us have problems in employment, try being trans or being trans and racialized, and try getting a job in this country. So if we get into the Employment Equity Act, the federal government will have to keep track, which they don't do right now. They have no idea how many queers work for them. They have no idea if they have transgender employees. The Employment Equity Act will make them keep track and will make them set targets for employment. And this will be really important to a lot of the most marginalized people in our community in getting a way into the federal public service. Some people make it. We know we're there, we're everywhere. But again, being in the Employment Equity Act is really, really important. The other work in progress, and again, we've got a public commitment that by the end of this parliament, the government will decriminalize HIV non-disclosure. This is a really, really critical thing to happen right now. We have the ability in this country to eliminate HIV/AIDS. We could do that by 2030, but there are certain things we have to do. And one of those is making sure that people have access to testing and treatment. And one of the biggest barriers to testing is this criminalization of non-disclosure, because people who haven't been tested don't know, and therefore can't be found guilty. And this is a particular problem in the sex work community. And so, again, we've got a work in progress. The government's now said they'll do it. So I don't have to draft the bill again, but we're almost there. The last thing I'm calling a challenge, and that is we are in a period since the pandemic of incredible hostility toward our community. In the last year that statistics were published, there was a 64% increase in hate crimes directed against our community. 64% in 1 year, right? All of you know it. All of us see it. But some of us suffer, again, more than others. And so if you're a queer youth, you're targeted. If you're transgender, you're targeted. And if you're racialized, you're targeted. And so this is our challenge. We have to call on our allies to speak out more effectively and to recognize this is a real thing. This is not just us being paranoid. There's been a change and the hostility is palpable. I posted about a motion. 2 hours, I had 4 vile comments, Facebook posts. I won't give you a sample. There's some real favorites there that occur again and again, but that's me. I'm a privileged cisgender white guy who's a member of parliament, and people think they can attack me. Think what the most marginalized in our community suffer every day from this increased hostility. So we got to call on our allies to speak up, and we have to stand together as a community against this rising hate, and we have to speak out for those who are most marginalized. We had in this country, people don't believe it, but in this country, so far this year, we've had 18 incidents of people disrupting elementary school activities based on gender transgressions that they perceive, including in Kelowna, where so-called adults, as I call them, disrupted an elementary school track meet demanding a gender certificate from a short-haired 9-year-old girl, right? What world are we living in where that is rational behavior? And so we got to stand together to protect queer and trans youth. We got to stand together to protect queer and racialized and transgender members of our community. And the new slogan for me, which I learned from a friend of mine in Winnipeg, who said, could you stop saying love is love? We all know that. Could we start saying love is action? Love is action. And so that's my challenge to everybody here tonight, that just like when you hear the land acknowledgement, as Marianne said, think about how, as Chief Andy Thomas said to me, how are we going to walk differently on this land when you hear land acknowledgement? And when you hear about the rising tide of hate and violence, think about what you're going to do to either help those who've been victims or to fight back against this tide. This is not Canadian. We can defeat this, but we're going to have to work hard. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, MP Garrison. With that, we've now come to a close from our opening remarks and into the next part of our session, which is our panel discussion. So first, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Sergio Lopez Ramos, who is the Strategic Human Resources Administrator at the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. Thank you. Yes, clap for him. Sergio is a professional with extensive experience in project management, stakeholder engagement, and change management. He holds a master's degree in political science from the University of Guelph. And his work right now is also in corporate social responsibility, political consulting, and government, which has taken him across Mexico, the United States, Canada. And he's honed in his skills and developed a passion for DEI, diversity, inclusion, as well as intersectionality and project management. Thank you so much for joining us, Sergio. We then have Jove Nazatul, our second panelist. Yes, please. Jove is a trans, non-binary, queer person of color and immigrant of mixed Asian heritage. Jove is a facilities maintenance worker at a local nonprofit, as well as a regional representative of the BC Center for Women in the Trades, as well as the first trans, non-binary person to be elected a board director of the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. Outside of their work in the trades, Jove is also a writer, filmmaker, and performer artist who is currently co-editor of Do Trans People Dream of Non-Binary Sheep?, the first gender-diverse performance art anthology in Canada. Jove is also producer of Color Vision, Victoria's only POC, People of Color, drag show, as well as Pride POC, Victoria's first People of Color Pride event. Jove is passionate about centering intersectionality and activism and wants to create lasting change in our community. Thank you for joining us. Yes, please clap. And our final panelist is Hannah Haddad, who is a graduate in business administration and has a strong background in nonprofit management as well as humanitarian work. He obtained his bachelor's degree in civil engineering and worked with the United Nations Commission of Human Rights, especially during the Syrian conflict and the ensuing refugee crisis in the Middle East. Hannah has been a vocal advocate for the 2S LGBTQIA+ community and provided life skills coaching for sexual health and advocacy in Syria. Since arriving in Canada in 2021, Hannah has volunteered with local nonprofit organizations and community centers, drawing on his knowledge and experience to support the community. Hannah is also driven by his passion, ambition, and determination to achieve social justice, as well as to stand on the right side of history. Hannah is also my colleague at Pride at Work Canada, and is the business development coordinator on the business development team. Thank you so much for joining us, and this is our wonderful panel. Give it up. And now we'll just get our microphones, please. Hello, hello. Testing, testing. Is it? Yes, it is working. A reminder too, we will have some time at the end of our panel discussion for Q&A section. So any questions that you may have, write them down and wait, and we'll have time for that. So yeah, seeing that today is Multiculturalism Day as well, which seeks to celebrate the cultural diversity of our communities. And we're also celebrating Pride season. I'd like to, begin our panel discussion. Wait a second, actually. I'm a little bit here. So our names. Yeah, so I'd like to begin our panel discussion reflecting a little bit on migrant leadership, which is the topic for why we're all here today, and specifically, what that means for each of us. So I can start so you have some time to think about it. For myself, I can say that migrant leadership extends beyond just, thinking about traditional leadership within employment. I'm also thinking about leadership within our own communities, within our own families, our friends, even for example, just organizing get-togethers, sending money back to our families. For instance, I think a lot about my auntie, who's been in Canada for more than 30 years. And, thanks to her work, her care, her ability, to host me so that I was able to come here to Canada and grow here. I don't know if she would consider herself a migrant leader, but it's through her leadership that I'm here today. So yeah, I think it's important to recognize and celebrate, the work and the leadership that we take, not only through our employment as well in our workplaces, but also, to think about the work that we do in our communities for our communities overall. So yeah, that's kind of what's coming to mind for me when I was thinking about the topic of migrant leadership. But I want to turn it back to the panel and hear, what does LGBTQI+ migrant leadership mean to you? Or what does being LGBTQIA+ migrant leader mean? I just repeated that again. Yeah, and so I'll start with you, Sergio.
Let me test. Yeah, it's working. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation and for your presence. Well, I think that most of us think that leadership means holding a position of power from a more hierarchical or well, vertical perspective. However, I like to think of leadership as a horizontal responsibility, where there is participative leadership and everyone is taken into consideration in the decision-making process. That being said, to me, queer immigrant leadership means being solidary people that are aware of their privilege and use their power to fight the status quo. Well, it's the status quo and the power imbalances, right? Of course. They're anti-racist. They work towards systemic change, where everyone can enjoy a safe space, culturally and psychologically, safe space. And in the context of multiculturalism, is key to understand as the member of parliament was saying before, that our communities is so diverse that we share several different experiences, but I think we also pursue maybe the same dreams of equity and solidarity, and we're working towards a world where everyone can fit regardless of our intersecting identities, right? Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. I'll pass it on to Jove.
So it's interesting. I've spoken at a few of these panels, specifically around the trades and advocacy in the trades. And I think this is the first time I've been on a panel that centers my immigration status and talks about me as being an immigrant. It's almost never talked about, right? We talk about, getting more women in the trades, or we talk about getting more queers into the trades, but we never really talk about migrants at all. And I think with migrant leadership, I think it is very important to set that, because a lot of us can't take or ignore those parts of ourselves. Like, I've spent a lot of money and a lot of time to move to Canada. We all move for a reason. We don't just wake up one day and decide, I'm just gonna move to a country halfway across the world where I know no one and nothing, right? And for me, for migrant leadership, specifically for the 2S LGBTQ community, I think it's a lot about taking up space and creating space for others just like us. And it's not enough for us to get there. We also have to bring everyone with us.
Very well said. Now, Hannah.
I want to say thank you, but I'm part of Pride at Work, but it's much different from being there and actually being here, to be honest. Okay, so back to your question, I believe it has various definition when it comes to this based on the experience and based on my experience as a refugee who came to Canada in 2021, and as MB Garrison spoke about what happening before, like opening that door. So I know what what's before that door is. And when I arrived to Canada, I thought that everyone will be holding rainbow flag and like hugging me in the street, but no, this is much different. So when I speak about like the leadership, I still seeing it as a privilege for refugees, because the system has a lot of gaps. And as an ex-employee in the United Nations, the moving from behind the desk to in front of the desk, I found a lot of the gaps in the refugee system. And for here to Canada, as also the mayor said, we have to change the fabric of the organizations. And as a part from Pride at Work, I believe my role, or like being a role model, it's to change this system and make it more accessible for everyone. Because if I am a leader for whatever who is behind me or like working with me, if there's gaps and barriers, I will not lead them to anywhere. I will stand by myself. So I have from my home country, we say like one hand doesn't make like an impact club. So like we have like to gather all of our hands together, like refugees, migrants, like government, organization to make like better impact for everyone.
Thank you so much for, beginning to contextualize what this means for all of you. And it's very personal, right? All of us here are migrants, which is also great. We have an all migrant panel as well. And so now I want to turn it, get a little bit more, personalized into each of your lived experiences. So I'll turn it back to Sergio, thinking about your work in the Black, Indigenous, People of Color, ERG Steering Committee in the BC Public Service. How is Victoria's landscape in terms of equity and inclusion, specifically of LGBTQIA plus migrants in the workplace?
Thank you so much. Just let me start trying to explain what we do at the BIPOC ERG. Well, as you say, is the Black, Indigenous, People of Color Employee Resource Group at the BC government. So we have like three main objectives, which are, well, we're a community for those who identify as BIPOC to share our truths and experiences. Second, we want to establish connections to build a community. And finally, we're working towards shared common goals. That includes creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive work environment. And in my experience at the BC Police Service, I have met deconstructed people that are very aware of their privilege and they use their own or and also by power. At the same time, I have met people that are continuously perpetuating those systemic issues and that are well, including racist, ageist, and I will say queer phobia. I mean, phobia to the whole queer community. So I remember in a previous job, like I was in a public body here in BC, in Victoria. I was processing the correspondence. It was my second job because I couldn't apply for a full-time position. So I was just like trying to get any job. And on the third day after I was just processing the correspondence at that public body, a very high leader came to my workstation and he asked me, "What are you doing here? Why are you processing correspondence?" And he told me, "You are overqualified for this job." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I know, but I mean, what can I do if I have applied for several jobs and I don't get any response, not even a written assignment, you know?" And sadly, I mean, of course, it ended there. Like, we didn't have a conversation about having a career plan, mentorship opportunities. That for us, like, we don't have social capital. Like here in Victoria, most of how many things work is because you have connections, you have social capital, you have someone that knows or that is gonna recommend you. But in our case as immigrants, like we're facing that reality. Like we have to knock several doors and see who is gonna respond, right? But I also want to quickly say that I want to acknowledge that some ministries have a diversity and inclusion teams, and they are working towards a change, like institutionally. And there are also like more employee resource groups that are trying to empower equity seeking groups. And also there are progresses at the BC government. For example, there are many communities of practice about gender-based analysis or GBA plus. It's a policy tool for developing like a gender-based plus lenses, just to include an intersectional perspective, lean practices, and also accessibility. And last year, the BC legislature, they approved the Anti-Racist Data Act that is trying, it's like the goal is to address all the challenges that we have, right? However, we're still missing concrete actions, on more, I will say like 3 very specific things. It will be more representation at leadership levels. I mean, there are very few Deputy ministers and ADMs, like the list. I don't even remember, sorry, what it means, ADMs. But maybe, yeah, sorry. Maybe it's,
High
maybe it's
leadership.
just the, right, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just the anxiety, sorry, of being here with all of you. And well, we are missing that representation, leadership, deputy ministers. Also, we need different hiring and rotation practices. There are several barriers that we are facing, you know. For example, there's like this like competencies interviews. So, but many of that information is not open to everyone, you know. So you have to be like Googling and just trying to look for the information. So that's another extra barrier that if you're not familiar or if nobody tells you about that, it's gonna be hard to find it out by yourself, right? And the last thing is also mentorship opportunities. Like it would be great if we could have like more mentorship opportunities just to know. There are many things like culturally we don't know. We're immigrants. Like we are coming with a different chip in our minds. So it's hard to unlearn and then learn several things. So that I think that overall the challenge is to keep talking the talk, but walking the walk with way more concrete and specific. And if it would be possible measurable actions, that would be amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now I'll turn it on to Jove. Also reflecting a little bit on your professional experience of, you know, how can employers and employees be able to act, you know, in allyship with LGBTQIA plus migrants, you know, specifically thinking about your work in the skilled trade sector? Yeah.
So the skilled trade sector, and I'm sure this is across other sectors, but I'm intimately familiar with the skilled trade sector. We're very behind in terms of social justice conversations. So I work with, you know, the BC Center for Women in the Trades. I just spoke in Winnipeg at the Sporting Women in the Trades conference. I'm not a woman. And my experience as a trans queer, you know, like immigrant is wildly different. You know, the skilled trades hasn't moved past, let's support cishet white women. We're doing it, we're very slow, we're very behind. And I know for a fact that this isn't just the trades because I work for a nonprofit that is like 90% staffed by white women with master's degrees. And like, no offense to these women, they've worked really hard to get to where they are, but they're not extending that hand to others, right? I am one of like, I don't know, 5 people of color that work in that office. And in the maintenance team, I'm the only not cishet white man. Like it's very, very behind still, that conversation. And, you know, it's really hard because I've, you know, in the last year, I've spent a lot of time talking about all the changes that need to happen in the skilled trades. And so I got up to a point where I was like, you know, maybe I really want to focus on DEI and that is what I want to do for a job. And I've sent out like, you know, I've sent out so many resumes, like I don't even get a call back. I don't, like, you know, I enter a job application, I don't even get, you know, a call back from any of that. And it's like, when I think about it, as an immigrant, like I got a degree in Singapore, where I'm from, a degree that is not valid here. I mean, it's valid if I want to pay more than I already have, you know, working on my immigration process, of which like it's not an insignificant amount of money, right? Like in the 4 or 5 years I've been here, I think I've spent maybe $5,000 on just my immigration process, just trying to get my passport translated. My passport that is English translated into English because that's what the government wants you to do. I speak English as a first language and I have to prove that I can speak English, right? And that's not a cheap exam. It's like $500. you know, and then I get the microaggressions on that front being like, oh, your English is so good. I'm like, English is my first language. I've been speaking it since I was a baby, you know? So I think it's a lot of organizations don't think so much about a person's lived experience when it comes to the hiring process. I have 32 years of experience of being an intersectional human. Like I am racialized, you know, I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm an immigrant. I have a lot of experience that I think a lot of people don't understand. And so they're not looking for that when I'm, you know, applying for a job. I can't be on my CV, say like, you know, my pros and cons, like, you know, my pros are I'm intersectional and these are all the things that I represent, because it's not what they're looking for. They're looking for, you know, your degree in HR or like women's studies or sociology or whatever in order to get that foot in that door. And it's not even happening, right? So yeah, I mean, the lack of intersectionality in the conversation around queer leadership, because when it's queer, it's like, oh yeah, we want to support 2S LGBTQ, but we don't talk about race, we don't talk about immigration, we don't talk about class, we don't talk about any of these things. And like, I think that really needs to be brought into the conversation. And I think all of those things are our like superpowers, right? Those are the things that make us empathetic and understand and compassionate.
Yeah, so if you are employers, please take note, hire us. You know, thank you, Jove, also for, you know, and Sergio, you're also highlighting that, you know, the barriers that we face to employment, you know, to all the money that we have to spend to be here, get that English test. And then the English stream got filled out. So now you have to do the French test, which happened to me. But yeah, now I'd like to hear a little bit from Hannah. You know, how can companies and organizations do a better job of creating opportunities for mentorship and sponsorship specifically for queer and trans refugees? And what specific changes do you think need to be made to support those efforts?
Sure. Like they can by being an ally to us. And when I say ally, I always say like it's a verb, not a noun, because like ally should be like with action. By like I'm bringing that because like I'm based in Toronto, and last week I saw like Toronto parade, and there was like participation of 250 groups over there, and all the corporates, let's say 99%, because like if I missed one of them, their signs was about like we support you, go ahead, and we are behind you. But we have to be like in the front. But this doesn't work because like we are the marginalized group, we are like the weak groups, and they have the power, they have the money, they have the system, and we want them like to be allied to us as a privileged group. And since we don't have this privilege as like refugees or immigrants, especially from the 2S LGBTQIA community, so we want to change this slogan to active actions. By as you mentioned, could be like sponsoring one of the events, educating their employees, change like one of the most important things is like changing the policies and make it like more inclusive for everyone. Because like sometimes they say like we are with you, but when you go like to their system, there is a lot of corruption and and gaps in their system. So like this has become as like refugee washing, let's say, or pink washing, that we are with you, but like it's you are already in your company or your organization, you have gaps. So you have like to solve these gaps before bring this like to the media and share it with everyone. And one of the things also, like Sergio has mentioned, it's like mentorship and understanding our community, where we came from, what's our background, what's our experience. And so, like when we came to Canada as refugees, we came like to start from the scratch. So also supporting us like individually could be helpful. When I came to Canada, they gave me like $50 and they didn't say anything. They said like, this is for you. And I went to the grocery stores and I came back. Then they wanted me like to pay $6 for the transportation. I told them I spent it all. They told me this should be enough for you like for 15 days. So, so there is bad calculation, there's gaps in the system, and we are here. We are ready like to help you, like all of us, three of us, we are like from this background, and we are here like to help you. What's our really needs, not what they think about it, because I can't speak about like Black people, and I'm not Black. So like to understand this system, use us, use our skills, and let's just share it with you, and like to be inclusive for everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing that, each of you, on your specific experiences. And, as we start to wrap up our discussion, what is one piece of advice that you would really like to share with those of us, who are LGBTQIA plus migrants, who are aspiring to leadership roles, or even just simply beginning to navigate the Canadian workplace? And I'll switch it up a little bit. So we'll start now with Jove. Sorry to put you right there on the spot.
I think a lot of communities feel like we can do everything by ourselves, and I agree to a point. But honestly, I think my biggest the lesson that I've taken from my journey is find allies, find the people who will support you and push you and put your name up for things when you don't always feel like you deserve it. And a lot of it is down to networking, which really is not easy when you're new to a country and you don't know anyone. But a lot of it is also being James Joe, this is what I do, teach a program, and that's kind of what you have to do. It puts the onus on the migrant, which is not my favorite thing to do, because we should have people supporting us. But unfortunately, we still have to navigate the system that we currently live in.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Hannah, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree 100% about what they say. And I would like add to that, it's about, I always say, since I arrived to Canada in 2021, the key was about connections. Because connections here in Canada, it's very important. And I know that, as I mentioned before, like we need money, but also like volunteering or participating in events or like educating ourselves, being in a role model as all of us today here. So this is all help. And unfortunately, like we have like this invitation that we have it today. And when I went to the washroom before I came like to the stage, I found like two of them like on the floor. So when you got invited to session, this means something, not just like, so use these educational things, even if you are like job seeker or whatever. And also one of the most important thing is like to have mentor like to lead you in this system, in this very complicated system, like because like you don't know where to start, because like usually, let's say like the regular system, you have like to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but in Canada you have like to go 4, 2, 5, 1, 3, because you don't know how, you don't know why, because like this is how the system has been built. So get a leader, like don't forget your passion. Like for everyone who arrived to Canada newly, everyone, when I came to Canada and I went like to one of the employment agencies, and I kept speaking about my experience like for 45 minutes, and next day they gave me like printed brochure about like what options of work that I can work, which was like delivery, like cashier, minimum wage option. Like it was already prepared, like because there is a stereotypes on us. And there is a sticker on my laptop for a woman wearing hijab, and someone saw it and they say like, oh, this is refugee. So there is a lot of stereotypes. We have to educate ourselves. We have like to build this system. change it. And like, as I said, we have not forget our passion and just like quit, because like this is a journey and it will take a time, but we will reach like for our goal.
Absolutely. Thank you. And now, Sergio, any advice for?
By the way, I remember what ADM means. It's the Assistant Deputy Minister. I'm sorry. But late, but it came. Okay. So I think I have like two very specific pieces of advice. The first, it will be to, as my colleagues just mentioned, like work on creating networkings. Like even for mental health, like you always need some support. Like, I don't know, what about you? Well, like I live by myself here in the country. I don't have any family here in Canada. So sometimes if you don't have like any support network, friends, pets, you name it, it's really hard to navigate the system, like emotionally. And then the weather doesn't help. I mean, thank goodness we're here in Victoria. It's better than, I think, than Ottawa maybe, or even Toronto, right?
Same.
Yes. But it's just, I mean, that's key, right? I mean, like having, and also like my colleagues just say, like having this social capital for us is just, it's key to like start working on social capital for getting like better job opportunities, for getting like better, yeah, like a better quality of life, generally speaking, right? And the other thing will be just to speak up. Like, I mean, sometimes it's hard just to be brave and speak up and say, talk about a situation that is not easy. Like I remember once, like some years ago, I had a coworker that it was like making comments about my accent, my lovely accent, you know, that I don't know why, but he was making those comments. I'm just joking. It's like I have a very thick accent and I get it. And also he was making like comments about my physical appearance, and it was like kind of passive aggressive. But I didn't want to say anything until I got my work like a letter of employment from this government office, because I was applying for my permanent residence. So I was like, okay, like just stay, like don't say anything, just do your best. And once you get that letter, then I'm gonna talk with my supervisor, right? But it's just like the timing. It's just like you have to be patient, and you have to be, I don't want, well, yeah, like
Strategic.
it's strategic, right? Like smart on about when you are gonna talk, right? And it's hard. I'm like, to me, like I didn't know how to navigate that situation, right? Thank you.
Could I just add something that I was reminded of when you talked about permanent residency? But a lot of us, while we were waiting for permanent residency, it's such a stressful process because it's so long. I was so stressed out. I paid every parking ticket on time because I didn't know if a parking ticket was going to be the reason I didn't get permanent residency, right? Like, it's just like there are so many things that could go wrong that the government could use against you, and you never know what that thing is. That I was like, I'm never going to jaywalk. I paid all my parking tickets. Like it was so much stress.
No, absolutely. It's like the panopticon, or so you're like, they're watching me. Well, no, but thank you so much for raising all those points. And now to turn it up a little bit, kind of like what Joe was saying, of like, sure, there's things that we ourselves can do, but we also need, other support. So, what strategies would you recommend employers consider when supporting us as LGBTQIA migrant leaders in the workplace, and maybe even beyond the workplace too, because we are part of your communities, right? Not only within the workplace, but yeah, maybe I'll start now with Hannah.
Yeah, sure. Jove has spoke a bit about like the hiring process, and I will mention it again because like it's very important, because like it's the first part of like being part of the company. And one of the practices, like since we are like immigrants, and most of us, because like you are English your first language, but not for me, but you can like, since like English is could be like none of our first language, we can like sharing in the hiring process, sharing the questions with like in the before the interview. So because like these immigrants, it's already like under pressure. So by sharing the questions before the interview, that it gives them like less nervous. And another part, like there's a lot of a program, there's a lot of resources also on our website, Pride at Work. There's like, if you want to lead with the Pride, there's like, we do have two programs, which is Flourish for like the ARG groups and the Thrive for the two LGBTQIA leaders. So if you don't know where to start, you can start from our website, Pride at Work, which is like one of the very good resources. And also for like the job seekers who they are looking for work, we have like our job board, like for queers who are looking for inclusive companies. So this is for the first part of like the hiring. After that, as I mentioned before, it's like by changing the policies that they have it in their organizations and getting the resources. And one also of the resources, it's our published report who has been published like 2 weeks ago, which is Lead with the Pride. And it's available for everyone. There's a lot of people saying like, we don't know how to access, we don't know where to start. Since like the educational things, like 80% of them, or I read this statistics, like 80% of changing the organization, it's like from education, which most of them for free. So like they don't have like to say, like usually say like for being accessible for this and that, we have to spend a lot of money. We have like to change our system, which is like takes time and money. But 80% of these resources worldwide, not just in Canada, it's for free. So they can use these resources, they can educate themselves, being in programs, changing their policies, and make their company inclusive for everyone.
Thank you. I'll now pass it on to Sergio.
I completely agree with Hannah. I think the first thing will be just attending trainings about identifying your own biases, diversity and inclusion, and what you can do with those trainings. Like several organizations, they just check the box. Okay, like you got the training, that's it. But what's next, right? So I think that's also like a key thing, just to work beyond the training, right? And maybe also just to change policies. I mean, to have like a clear like diversity and inclusion policy, something like a very clear also mechanism against discrimination. I mean, how to denounce discrimination. And the second thing that I completely agree with Hannah, I mean, besides hiring more or diversifying the workforce, like with immigrants and with all our intersectionalities, like we need more representation at the leadership level. Like every time I see the leader of the NDP, I'm like, wow, like a brown guy like me, it's an MP, you know? I mean, for me, like I'm old, it's great. It's like, okay, like I can do it, right? I mean, I can pursue my dreams. But if I don't see any representation at the leadership level, it's like, I don't know if it's possible or not. And the other thing is that helps us to destroy or to tackle down all the stereotypes, right? So that's like let's say it's a continuous learning that we have to do. Thank you.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think too, very similarly, or with organizations, you know, they might think, oh, we're very diverse, you know, but is that diversity at the top level too, right? And often it's like, oh, well, we need to give more mentorship or skills to immigrants. And it's like, actually, we already have many skills, right? Many years, we have many degrees, you know, so it's more like, maybe we don't need more of that mentorship. We just need space to come into, you know, what we already have to let us show you, you know, the experience that we already bring with. Yeah. And finally, Jove.
So my answer is a little bit more skill trade specific, but I think this applies to all industry. One of the big ones, the skill trades, is having a dire worker shortage. And instead of capitalizing or, like letting immigrants who have that trades background work in trades jobs, we're not taking into account all of their experience, all the education that they've already gone through. Like I interviewed someone at work who was an electrician for like 15 years. He can't get an electrician's job here because he's not qualified under, the skilled trades program, which I think is, I mean, I'm sure smarter people than I can find out a way to make that work, but that needs to start now, right? The other thing is, with training, and I've been yelling this at every skilled trades conference I can, social justice training needs to be mandatory for all trades workers, and not just, and this applies to all industry, not just leadership, because leadership almost never hangs out with your workers. You only see leadership when you get into trouble, mostly. So, in order to create a safe space at work for your workers need to have that social justice training in their belt. And this needs to happen as frequently as WMIS or as first aid. We all can do that we do that every year, first aid every couple of years. Why can't we do social justice training once a year? Spend half a day just learning about something that is outside of your experience as, maybe a cishet white man, right? Just so that we can make that space safer. Because a number of times I've had to field questions about like, oh, what does it mean as an, what's your experience like as an immigrant? Or like, what's your experience as a trans person? What's your experience as a brown person? And I'm like, well, I mean, if I could get paid for this education, that'd be great, but I don't, right? So yeah,
Okay,
that's
yes,
kind
as
of where
well.
I'm at.
Yeah. So with that, that's the question.
Just I want to add
please.
something about it reminds me of something. When I came to Canada, they told me like, because my accent is not like too much Middle Eastern, it's like as Eastern Europe. So they told me like to say that I'm Romanian. I'm like more higher, like paid, like if I said like I'm Romanian. So like this is like a lot of things that we get through it. We don't know like, is it good, is it bad? So I totally understand like what they say.
No, absolutely. So yeah, now we'll move on into our Q&A section. So yeah, just feel free to raise your hand. We will be having Clean pass on the mic to you so you can ask any questions. And while you think about your question, I do have something prepared. So, and also just want to remind you folks, to keep the questions related to our topic, of course. We want to engage with respect, care, compassion. But yeah, I also wanted to, before we start getting questions from the audience, what unique strengths or skills do you feel that being an LGBTQI plus migrant leader brings to your professional life, and how have you used these strengths to achieve success, or to even just get into your field? And then any of you can take the floor.
I can start again about like what MB Garrison said about like what's happening before the door while we are applying for being a refugee before Canada. So one of the skills that we learn, it's like working under pressure because like this is skills that we face the real pressure that we are. Because for me, like I'm from Syria, but I can't apply directly because like there's no Canadian embassy in Syria. So I have like to travel to another country, and I travel to Lebanon to apply for Canadian, like seeking asylum refugee. And for me, it was like day to day that I opened like Canada.ca and like putting all information and to check like if my application gets through. And at the same time, I was illegal in Lebanon, and I was bringing all my skills. So like this is working under pressure example, and also time management, because we have like, since we arrived here to Canada, I don't know the time difference between here and like our home country. Like I don't know how the time is going here. Like in my home country, I used like go to work, after that, like go to gym, after that, seeing my friends and everything. But here in Canada, I just like go to work, eating dinner. Also, I skip like breakfast and lunch because there's no time like for so so like being here in Canada, you know how to time management because like we are people know how to do like our time management. And there's a lot of examples related also to diversity, related to accepting each other, because like we have been through the worst situation ever as refugee, and we came here, we just like want, like for me Canada, it was a dream, and today I'm putting like Canada flag here because like it was a dream. And the most common like tattoo for all refugees, it's a plane, because like it's a dream for all refugees. So we came here, we bring all our passion, and we just want like to use this our passion and our skills and give it to this country or another country. So this is a skills, it's very important, and we just like want to work and live a better life than we used living back home.
Absolutely. Do any of y'all have thoughts on that?
Just to touch a little bit on that, I think, we bring a lot of, like, we know how to deal with bureaucracy and all the red tape that comes with immigration. When I was doing my immigration for permanent residents, I didn't use a immigration lawyer because I'm cheap. And so I, as English as my first language, still had trouble trying to understand what this government form wanted from me. And I had to ask another immigrant who asked another immigrant, and then that train kind of got back to me and was like, I kind of understand what this means now. But I think, to touch a little bit on this experience we bring, for some of us, we have been persecuted back home, from where we come from, especially as being queer or trans. I moved to Canada, wasn't expecting to stay, but I did. But one of the main draws of moving to Canada was like, I could get married to a same-sex partner. Now I'm trans, so it's all, yeah, that was my gateway, but like, it's just, we have so many stories, we have so much experience. Like I'm confident that in my 30 plus years of living, that I have had to go through a lot more than a lot of people just to be where I am today. And I think we should use that. We should use that knowledge.
Absolutely. Thank you. I don't know, Sergio, do you have any thoughts?
Right. I think resilience, it will be one of the skills that we are bringing. Like my colleagues were saying, I mean, we have gone through several situations, let's say, right? That we are like, I'm gonna say experts, but we are like, we have some proficiency going through bureaucracy, like queerphobia in our home countries, and also like adapting and learning many new cultural things that sadly, when you get your PR, you don't get like a manual about how to be a Canadian, right? I mean, sadly, it would be great just to get your PR and then blah, like magic, right? I mean, something that you have to learn. It takes time, it takes effort, and if you don't have someone and it guys that to guide you, it's just hard. But I think like we're very resilient and we can bring that to the table. That's a skill, like necessary skill for working anywhere. And the second thing, it will be like we have, like for all our intersectionalities, we have like very different mindsets and ways to think. So, I mean, I've seen several people here that I'm gonna say like sometimes they don't think out of the box, and it's like, I mean, even if you try to suggest like another way to solve a situation, they're no, I mean, that's not the way, right? Or we are afraid about the outcome because maybe people have not tested that, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible, right? So if people at work, they give us the opportunity of like, test another way, I think we're gonna bring we could bring even innovation and other ways to improve processes and how we work, right? But of course, it's something that hopefully employees are gonna value. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that has come up, I think, through our conversation a lot of there needs to be a change in the valuing of our lived experience and adding that within the hiring process as well of not only, you know, okay, do you have this degree, but what else? Right. So yeah, I'd like to open it up to any questions from the audience that we may have. Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your contributions. My name is Alexi Warwick. I work for the BC Public Service. Sergio will be in touch to talk about leadership opportunities. I really appreciated your different stories. I'm also an immigrant, went through the whole PR work visa process for many, many years, only recently became Canadian, so it happens, you can get there. I was wondering that I've benefited from huge privilege from both having a North American passing accent and being white, being cis, and still finding resonating so much with the experiences you've been talking about as a migrant worker. And I was wondering if you could share your experiences with such language as migrant, expat, refugee, immigrant, and what variations you see there, what those words mean to you, and what people here can take away in terms of using that language to describe the people around them that they see and what intersections those are bringing up and how it others the people they're describing.
I can start. I think expat is solely reserved for white folks. When you're brown, you're either a migrant worker or an immigrant or that person, you know, you people. And I think that language is hard to change. I do think that I personally like to center the fact that I'm an immigrant, because that means, you know, I understand that I've gone through this process in order to come to Canada, right? I also use the term settler because we are all settlers, and I use this specifically for Canadians as well. When people say you're an immigrant and you're a settler, you know, I think we cannot forget how Canada came about, and I think we need to center the fact that all of us at some point were immigrants. Right? We might be first, second generation Canadian, but like if you go far back enough, most of our ancestors came from somewhere else. And so that really makes us not very different from everyone else. And I think that's kind of how I want that language to change. But yeah, expats, white people, immigrant, everyone else.
I can share my experience. Like, for me, like they consider me as white passing. I don't know like this is standards how it works, but they consider me as white passing. So like this is kind of a privilege that I do have it. So but when I started speaking, they like after 5 sentences, they told me like, oh, tu parlais en français? I thought, no. I'm from Syria. Then they say, oh, so, and becomes like the stereotypes comes about like question by question about my background, and like the thing that they just like, I don't blame them, because like the only source they have it's the news, and the news it's led by political, and political it's related to diplomatic relationships, and the diplomatic relationship between Canada and Syria is not good. So for sure they will know like bad news about my country and about us. But yeah, this sound like when someone like sharing that I came as a refugee over here, I still, when I saying it, I saying it's as a privilege, because there is more people in super bad situation, they are still back, not just in Syria, worldwide, more than the people who got asylum in Canada or different countries. So there's a lot of work that we still have to do it, not just like being happy of arriving to this country, because like I will say 95% of refugees, when they arrive to new country, they got a mental health situation called survivor complex, which is like we start blaming ourselves about like what the privilege that we have it, since we are like safe over here. I can hold my partner hand, while over there they are like, they are acting, they are like heterosis people, and they are maybe like trans people over there, but they are hiding. So every moment we are like spending here, it's privilege for people who are there. So like the sound of refugee, when I say it or I hear it over here in Canada, I still hear it as a privilege, because like it's a dream for a lot of people over there.
Thank you for sharing.
And I completely agree with you. I mean, I have not gone through your experience. I came to Canada as a student. My experience has been different. But I think like for all the things that we had to pay for, like it's such a privilege to being an immigrant, and at the same time it's like it's a challenging process. And like in my experience, even at work, like in government, some people have asked me like, hey, why don't you teach like Spanish, just like a social activity, right? And I'm like, I mean, that's not my only skill, you know, like speaking Spanish, I'm not like, so it's something that is really hard. I don't know why it's really hard for people to differentiate like your cultural background, that you're bilingual, or you try to be bilingual at least, and then the person, you know, I mean, like you deserve respect, that you are someone else that has dreams, skills, and that can contribute to the large community. Is not only, oh yeah, you're an immigrant, right? But it's really, it's challenging just to make that difference, or at least to help people understand that like racialized people, or we just are here like trying to pursue a dream. So I think, yeah, but it's I mean, when this person told me, why don't you teach Spanish, I was like, no way. I mean, like that's not like the only thing that I can do, you know. So it's and I'm not sure, yeah, like how has been your experience too, but it could be challenging.
Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Thank you, Colleen. So we're the hotel here, and we have 105 employees with where we represent 19 unique countries, 22 unique languages, and a lot of our employees are, you know, they're multicultural and have, yeah, like you've talked about, a far greater skill set than what a hotel can offer, right? We're like the stepping stone, right? And we're fine being a stepping stone because we've got great employees that we'll have for a couple of years as they get settled and move on. But how can we as employers support our team members and help them? It's not like upskilling because they already have the skill, but how do we help them move beyond being house persons or maintenance and maybe become maintenance managers or move further? So how can we help them in that capacity?
For me, at first thing I will say, ask them, ask what their need, because like if you ask me, I have need different than other persons. So like you can run a survey at the beginning, what their needs are, how could you help them, and you can share like what's not like helping. So like you, let's say like you can share in that survey that I'm looking to help you like, let's say financially or like buy courses. So say what the options that they have it and ask them about what their needs. Let's say like in courses, what the courses you need, financially, like how could you help them? So secure their needs, and after that, like put the findings, put the priorities, and we know like this takes action plan. It's not like by day and tomorrow. So it will take a time. So put a plan for that and work on it.
I think some kind of navigation of the Canadian system, I think is important, because I know lots of people who come here and they have driver's licenses that they're not valid here past like the 90 days. Like, and a lot of them don't even know what it means to go to ICBC and stand in line, or like now ICBC doesn't even have a line anymore. You have to go in with an appointment. Like, I think some kind of navigation of that Canadian system that is different than, you know, where they were from, I think is important. Because even the process of getting a driver's license, not even because you have to, so I got a driver's license in Canada. I had a driver's license from before. You know, I had to come here, I had to give up my international license, hoping that I will pass the Canadian test. But I had to do a knowledge test, and then I had to do a road test. And like, so much of that is just like, when you're new and you're just trying to figure out your way, like it's overwhelming, because on top of that, you're trying to figure out how to set up a bank account, how to set up housing, how to, you know, how to pay for parking or whatever, right? Like, so much of that in the first little bit is super, super hard. And I was very lucky that I moved to a really small town. So like, you know, there wasn't any line anywhere. It was Port Alberni, BC. And like, so you know, it's not as bad as it is like here in Victoria, where like you can't even walk into an ICBC anymore.
Yeah, I would say ask like people that are working with you, like what they want, like what are their like what are their previous careers, like what they want to do here in Canada, like engage them, understand what they are looking for, their plans, and as Hannah said, also work on a career development plan. You know, like very specific trainings, maybe like mentorship. Well, not maybe mentorship also. So it will even for, I mean, as an employee, you really appreciate those actions that you know that are gonna help you to get where you want, right? And like, I think that if employees do that, like even like an employee is gonna be more engaged to work in a company where you are valued, and when you know where you know that they are investing in you. Maybe, and I mean, you know that maybe you are not gonna stay there forever, but like if someone is investing in me, I'm gonna work harder for them, right? Thank you.
We also had a question. Oh, yeah.
Thanks. I wasn't the person who had my hand up. This was just a spontaneous question. I have a fun one for all four of you, if you're willing. Let's say I was a leader who was planning a leadership conference in the fall, and I wanted to invite you, each of you, to come and speak to a group of leaders. What is something that you would love to talk about? And this is jumping off of Sergio's comment about being able to teach more than Spanish. What would you want to teach a group of leaders? What would you want to speak about if you were like a keynote speaker at a leadership event? Fun question.
Well, to me, what I've seen at like in my experience, like I think I will be talking about collaborative leadership, like engaging everyone in the organization, talking with them about what they want, their dreams, how they see the organization, the challenges that they are facing operationally and maybe like at the managerial level. Because what I've seen, sadly, here, like in many government institutions, is that everything is like, it's very hierarchical. They don't ask for like what do you think it may work or what it should be changed. It's also like, it's only what the leader says, regardless of age. Like most of the leadership here in BC government is white and like straight guys and old, right? So it's just a little bit, it's challenging. Like, I mean, how I can engage with people that they don't get that, besides a generational gap, like that I also want to be part of the decision-making process. It's not only what you think, it's like we're here on the same boat, right? I think those will be my keynotes. Thanks for the question.
Do you have like half an hour, maybe a day, like an hour? Like, cause that list is very long. But you know, in past speeches that I've given, I've always tried to center intersectionality because I think that is not talked about enough. I think that the compounding nature of oppression is something that people don't ever really think about. You can't separate my racialized identity from my queer identity from my immigrant status. Like you can't separate that. I am a whole person with all of those parts of me. And so like, you know, I would spend a lot of time talking about intersectionality, and I would talk about how hard it is sometimes, right? And I would urge leadership to put the money where the mouth is. You know, love is action. Right? Just like it's not enough to say we're inclusive, we're supportive. No, you need to show it, right? So like, do you have diversity in your company? And not just like race or gender or sexuality, but like other things. Like, can we, you know, speak to someone who is a different class than us? Can we speak to someone who's an immigrant? Or, you know, can we speak to someone who's a drug user? That is a big one that we often like, you know, look down on. We often kind of like shun those members of our community when like those members of our community also need the help, you know? And I think that's what, and I kind of wanted to get to this, in that I think part of what we have as intersectional human beings is the ability to see wider than ourselves. So because I'm intersectional, I know all the intersections that I don't park at, right? So I think more about, you know, Indigenous people. I think more about like the disabled people. I think more about those other communities that I don't necessarily am not a part of, but like I know that I'm missing something, right? I know that I'm not a part of those communities, but then I go seek out all the parts that I'm missing from the conversation. A big one is actually age, because like I serve on the board of directors for the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum, and I'm the only millennial in that room. And I'm the youngest one. And I'm like a late millennial. Like there are so many of these cishet white men and women want to make the decisions to make the trades more accessible, the trades more exciting and more, you know, cater to the youth. They're like in their 50s and 60s. Like, what do they have in common with the youth? Nothing. I don't have very much in common with the youth, right? And so it's like, I think we're missing a lot of youth leadership in industry. And we're like, oh, you know, you can only be a leader if you've been working for X amount of years and you've been in a company for X amount of years. And it's like, no, I can make decisions and I can come up with good solutions for the problems that we've been facing for the last 50 years, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say also definitely like bringing in that youth perspective. I'm the youngest member at Pride at Work Canada. So yeah. And I feel like I even broke the, what is it? The glass ceiling just because I have a job in something that is, you know, related to what I studied. And a lot of my friends that are also migrants, are also youth, are struggling a lot to just get like that stable job that would even just like allow you to get to permanent residence and such. So I think definitely also, yeah, definitely centering youth, you know, because that's the other part of it too. We've mentioned a lot, you know, the skills that we have as migrants, if we had, you know, experience in our workplaces, but what about like the youth that we necessarily don't have, you know, that just like work experience, or maybe, you know, just recently graduated as well, or and trying to get those jobs in our own field. It's very, very hard. So yeah, I would definitely like to highlight youth as well. Hannah, you're good.
We definitely need to capitalize on them before they get jaded.
Yeah, for me, I will speak like if I'm in this position, like I will speak like Smith has put the principles of leadership in 1930s, which is like 80 or 90 years back, and he was like cis white man. So I will speak about the diversity in leadership and how to be being like more dynamic when we are like doing especially like diverse like a group. So because like back in the past, like there was one decision for one action. So if this 1 + 1 = 2, but in diversity could 1 + 1 equals a 3 or equals 0, because it depends on the case. So like I will speak about diversity and like dealing with individual case by case and what the dynamic things and what we have to change in 2023 more than like what we are still getting from the 1930s, from the 5 principles of leadership.
I also wanted to, Valerie, I think you wanted to ask a question. I saw your hand, so maybe we can get the, oh, at the very back, yeah.
Hi, everyone. Talking about youth and about how newcomers can come here and be part of the conversation. I think it's so important to highlight that a lot of us are now thinking about leaving the country, if not the 30% of everyone that I know is thinking about leaving the country. What would you say to them, and which resources are you do you think will be good for them? Because right now I think getting a job here that is not in housekeeping or something related to that is so hard as a newcomer, and more if you arrive like me. I arrived at 17 years old here, and I kind of break all the barriers that I have, but a lot of my friends are not, and they're right now being a stereotype. They're part of the stereotype, and not only that, but the statistics of not being good enough, because that's what we think. Which resources do you think it will be helpful for them? And not only that, but what would you say to them, and what would you advise to them? Thank you.
I will start like I will shortly, like at the beginning I will say like words just like blah blah blah, but it's important. Like I will tell you, look for a company who is like accepting you and understand your identity and understand in your experience. And yes, you can find a job board, you can find like a lot of companies who respect your identities and background. But since still like there are like just a few companies, and this is like invitation for more companies like to be more inclusive. So as I said, like in the previous question, it's about connection and getting a leader to lead you, or like the newcomer to lead you in this country, because like it will make it much easier, since the system is bad. I will use the word bad because I'm on the stage. If I'm
I would say definitely, or at least I can speak from my experience. I had very discouraging moments, especially when I just finished my degree and then was waiting on, didn't know if I was going to get the post-graduation work permit. And so I was like, should I just go back? Like, I'm trying to get a job, cannot find one. And then I was very lucky. I'm very lucky that I still live with my auntie. And that's why I still live with her. I live in Vancouver. It's very expensive, as you imagine. And for me, it was also embracing like being unapologetic, because my auntie was like, well, you know, you got to dress a certain way, like leave your hair long, like there's as many things that you have to do just to get that job. And I was very conflicted. Like I did send out many resumes. Like I would look at the company before I decided which pronouns to use on my resume. But I think like at the end, just deciding to be myself was very pivotal. Of like, okay, I came all the way from Mexico to here. Like if here I cannot be myself, then I might as well just go back, right? And yeah, and I really went for what I wanted. I feel very lucky right now to be at Credit Work Canada. But before getting here, you know, I started at Jobs for Queers, YVR, Facebook, you know, and then just applied for that, didn't get it, but then volunteered, got into just that first job, which I'm still very, very grateful for, because I feel like once you get that first job in the industry that you want to go into, from there, it gets better. It gets really better, because I think that's what Canadian employers want to see. Unfortunately, they really just want to, okay, at least you have one, you know, experience in our sector. So, and yeah, and if you are an employer, like, please give us like that first chance, you know, especially like youth, right? Even if we don't have necessarily like all of the experience, like we learn very fast or very eager. We're like desperate, honestly, right? And not to take advantage of that too, but like for real, like we want to get into it. We want to stay here. We want to make it work. And so from my experience, like that really was like staying true to myself. You know, I'm very grateful I'm at a place where, you know, I can be my true self, and that would be my advice.
Get married to a Canadian. But like in all seriousness, like I can't speak so much about that just because like I work in the skilled trades, and because of such the worker shortage we have, you know, the last time I lost my job, I got a job in like 2 weeks from the time that I applied to the time I started a job, right? So the skilled trades, you know, I know it's not for everyone. Trust me, we've had a lot of conversations around trying to get the skilled trades to be more appealing to youth. And yeah, it's not great, but like, you know, there are, in BC alone, there are over 100 skilled trades. We don't even know the half of it. Like most people don't, you know your carpenters and your plumbers and your electricians, but there are so many different jobs that you can get into that don't always require you to be physically like fit. You know, you can be a CNC operator, you can sit behind a computer all day. Like these are all things that are something that you could think about. Skilled trades, yeah.
Well, first of all, like it's sad to hear that kind of like perspectives, but I mean, I completely understand. Like it's discouraging just to look for jobs and don't find anything, or don't getting any response. It's like, what's going on, right? So I think like one of my pieces of advice will be just to use, for example, LinkedIn. I mean, it's something like very basic, but if you customize your resume, like just to show what you're looking for, and if you start like messaging or like emailing like people that are working in the industries that you want to work for, and I think that would be like a good start. That's one thing. And the other thing is just try to volunteer if it's possible, and just there are some, for example, at SFU, there are some Simon Fraser University, SFU, there are like some educational opportunities, right? I mean, we were part of this like immigration leadership program. I applied for a scholarship. Yeah, okay. So we both applied for scholarships. We got them, and you can like you can network with amazing people that are already working on maybe the fields that you want to work. So maybe like even like any piece of advice from them, or even like connecting with people or like getting recommendations for a potential work. I mean, that's amazing. That's where the magic starts to work. But I know it could be discouraging, but like, I mean, I think we can do it. That's why I was talking about resilience, just to be like being stubborn and say like, okay, I have to find a way, right? And it's one day at a time. I mean, don't try to look at the whole picture, like, okay, like if I don't get this for, like, it's just like one day at a time you can start building, right? Like it's one, sorry, it's one brick per day, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one more question. Yes, this will be the last.
So I don't know, this might be, maybe this is relevant for Sergio and hopefully for other people as well, but I work in the BC Public Service as well. And I often find myself in a position of being a hiring manager. I do a lot of competitions. I run a lot of competitions, and we struggle to get people to screen through the incredibly baffling, weirdly coded, very hostile process to even get their application in the door. And we are currently, like, I've been trying with my team to, to make our job descriptions so that we remove all of the restrictions and all of the barriers that we can think of. We try to eliminate the requirements that aren't absolutely necessary for our job, just to try to get a broader pool of people in so that we can actually talk to people. But one of the things that I struggle with the hardest is the fact that the process is out of my control and I have no way to game that system. It's so strictly policed and monitored that I can't have the latitude of human connection to support the work that I'm trying to do. And so I'm curious to know if people have any, first of all, quick wins around BC Public Service job postings that might be helpful for me in terms of what I should be including or not including. And second, whether there's any organizations or work that's happening outside of that system to connect people with like individuals who would be willing to coach them. Like I would love to coach people to get them into the system, but I don't know where to start. And I'm just curious if you guys are aware of anything that's already happening or underway that's outside of the public service that might be a better avenue for that for people who are interested.
I'm from Toronto, so I will skip that. I will skip this.
So, well, you can reach out to us at Pride at Work Canada, and to talk for us to talk more around like ways that you can get started, because I think we often get these when with the people that we work with our clients is like they want to make a change, but it's like you don't know even where to start, and often with that would include an action plan, as you said, like you already have. We have audits that we can go through to really evaluate, the process of what you have right now and what needs to change, right? And maybe you can bring that back to the BC Public Service leadership and show, okay, this is where we're at now. Yeah, and kind of like, or maybe Sergio can speak to that, or kind of what you were saying of changing the way things are done. Like sometimes systems just need to be disrupted.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, like I know it's even, well, I work in strategic human resources, and I have heard like several managers complaining about the lack of people. And I'm like, I have applied for several jobs before. It's hard to get like the foot in the door. Yeah, I mean, like if I get shortlisted, it's like I want to throw a party, because working on customizing a single resume, to me, like I'm not a native speaker, it takes me like a week, plus the screening questionnaire or the cover letter, right? So I think like I understand that maybe the process like belongs to the PSA. I mean, like to the Police Service Agency, they own like the whole process. But something that I've seen at the BC Human Rights Commissioner office, they like for all their job postings, I think they offer like some workshops, so they go through the job posting, they explain all the competencies that they're looking for. They explain to people how they should apply for. So that gives people like more information. Like if I that was one of my main issues as a newcomer, like how to navigate the system, like the competencies like interview, like the STAR methodology. I was like, what's that? It's like the STAR methodology is like you have to explain a situation, task, action, result, and then how that's related to the job that you are applying for. Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, that was my face. Like when I moved to Victoria, that was my face. I was like, I'm not gonna never land a job in government. How I'm gonna do that? Like in Mexico, you use the same resume for all the job applications that you are applying for. But here is one of the main things that, at least as a newcomer, I struggle with, like working on a single resume. For me, it's like oh my God, like I'm not gonna have like time during that week. It's just like work resume. So And the other thing that maybe you could do is just like try to connect with more organizations that are like in social development, at our Ministry of Social Development, there are like way more job postings or positions that are hybrid or remote. So now in some ministries, not in all of them, you can work like anywhere from BC, which is great. You know, it's providing more opportunities to more people. So maybe like just to look for or try to connect with local organizations that are working with immigrants, and if they work with immigrants with intersectionalities, that would be even better. Like I think in Vancouver, that's one of the main, let's say, advantages, that there are like way more organizations that have that like approach, like Mosaic, right? I mean, even of course, like even Pride work, but like here in Victoria, maybe like ICA or VIRCS, you know, like, I mean, I think those will be the organizations that to look for. And even maybe not for profits, like not like funded by the government per se, you know, that will be my piece of advice. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in our panel discussion. And let me switch back here. And just wanted to share before we move on, I'll start Q&A. Some of our upcoming events that we have, again, as I mentioned, we'll be having our next ProPride in-person event at St. John's, but it will also be hybrid, so you can also access the live stream in July. We also have workshops, upcoming virtual roundtable, more ProPride in-person events that you can check out within our website as well. Please, we'd love to stay connected and keep the conversation going. And finally, we also have, again, our same QR code from the beginning, but now through here, if you scroll, you'll be able to get to the survey page. We, again, appreciate really your feedback, but no worries too. We'll also follow up with an email that has the same QR code that you can access if you're not able to do so right now. But yeah, I want to thank, you know, all of our panelists today for all the knowledge, the wisdom that you shared so kindly, so very generously with everyone here today. I also want to take a moment. I got confused with the microphones. I'm like, which one is it? I also want to share, you know, my gratitude to our host sponsor again, Parkside Hotel, specifically Trina White for your remarks, as well as Colleen for all of your hard work in today's logistics. I want to thank also Mayor for coming here, MP Garrison, who they've had to leave early, but they came here to give some remarks, you know, our panelists, Jove, Sergio, Hannah, you know, and also my colleagues, Pride at Work, also and Sandeep here today for supporting in this event, our virtual captioners, all of our virtual listeners as well, the folks, all our event time to come and join so much. And we move on to reception. We have more food coming by. There's still lots here. And I think there's still some bit of sun, so we can still enjoy the outdoors. But thank you so much again for coming, and please enjoy the rest of our event.